Welcome to Success in Business, a benefit of your Chamber of Commerce membership. I'm Cindy Henry. Today's presentation is 5 tips for effective PowerPoint presentations, presented by Joe Jolin of Jolin Media. After spending years in corporate marketing, Joe realized that many of the same marketing practices and resources that large corporations engage in can also be utilized by small businesses. He started Jolin Media and developed a simple process to give small businesses the opportunity to effectively share their message and market their products and services to get results. Please welcome Joe Jolin.
Thanks, Cindy. First of all, I want to thank you for allowing me to come in a little bit early and play around with this new platform, this presentation platform. What I was really excited about was playing around with maybe the different filters that you guys maybe have. Because I was kind of maybe hoping that there was like a hair filter or something that can maybe block some of this shine. But unfortunately, I guess I just assumed that since Jeremy's a part of the partnership and he's a lot balder than I am. So anyways, you don't have that, but we're going to go ahead and carry on. So I appreciate the Chamber for allowing me to do this. And I also appreciate you, Chamber members, for joining me today to talk a little bit about PowerPoint. So with that, let's go ahead and get started. All right. So you've probably seen it. I got to throw up a little office here. My son said, if you're doing a PowerPoint, you got to pull in Michael Scott from the office to do a little PowerPoint. So with that, let's go ahead and carry on. So a little bit about me. I am a Western Illinois University alumni. I currently live in West Burlington with my beautiful family there on the right-hand side. I recently just started Jolin Media, as Cindy alluded to. I'm also a part of the Chamber Board and ambassador, and I am a recent graduate of the Greater Burlington Leadership class. So something I'm very proud of. So I guess I'm going to throw that little plug out there for the leadership group. So if you are part of it and you know someone that would like to join, it's a very beneficial class that I would really highly recommend. So with that, let's go ahead and dive on in. So PowerPoint. Before we dive into it a little bit, let's talk a little bit about PowerPoint. So PowerPoint's been around since the early 80s. I doubt that anybody that is on this webinar has not heard of PowerPoint. So to be honest, when I was approached about doing this presentation, I was a bit nervous as to what I would talk about because it's been around for so long. But after thinking about it for a little bit, I realized, it is pretty good to take a look at it and maybe look at some tips, kind of do some research to see what are some things we can do to make any PowerPoint more effective. So, but with that also, PowerPoint is such a great presentation tool that it has been around for so long. There are a lot of various features within PowerPoint that can be used for many different types of presentations. So it can be used for business settings. It can be used for churches, politicians, music bands, engineers, lawyers, architects, as well as teachers, salespeople, doctors. So because it's so versatile, there's not one specific roadmap or set of instructions that I could provide that would work for every single presentation. So what I hope to accomplish today is to provide general guidelines or best practices for any type of presentation. So in other words, this presentation isn't going to be very technical as far as do specific things. It's going to be a little bit more on general guidelines. And so with that, let's go ahead and dive in. So when I was preparing this, there's really a theme that kind of continued to come back to me. And that's, if you could remember just one thing from this presentation and everything else you forget, if there's just one thing that you can remember, that would be to limit distractions. So that's really the name of the game. Just about every point in this presentation is going to circle back to these 2 words. If you limit distractions within your presentation, it will help with overall knowledge retention of your audience, and it'll help you keep on track as to what you want to get across in your presentation. So keep these 2 words in your mind as we move forward through this presentation. Just remember to limit distractions. So what are we going to cover? So the first thing we're going to talk about is what I call PowerPoint housekeeping. And when in here, this is pretty much kind of some general do's and don'ts that some of you may have heard, some of you may have not. So, and then also we're going to talk about just 5 tips to help you with your next presentation. So with that, let's go on to the general housekeeping. So what I'm considering in the housekeeping, the first section has to do more with just general do's and don'ts. So I like to think of these as housekeeping, because what I kept thinking of is when you go to a conference or a seminar, and a person gets up on stage and talks about the very beginning and tells everyone, here's general housekeeping items. Here's like, where's the bathroom at? Or when lunch is going to happen, when it's time to network, and what's in the packet in front of you. So I consider this section as kind of just general do's and don'ts, general information that some of you may know and some of you may have heard from the first time. So let's dive into the first housekeeping item. So the first item is what is called the 6x6x6 rule. So what I found interesting is I had first known this as the 6x6 rule. So this additional 6 that popped up, I thought that was pretty interesting. So let's dive into that. So I'm going to just go ahead and throw all the points up on the screen right away. So the 6x6x6 rule states that you should have no more than, so again, no more than 6 bullets per slide, 6 words per bullet, and lastly, which is the last one, is no more than 6 slides in a row. So the point of this rule isn't to just keep you to a strict regimen, like you must follow these rules or you're a loser or something. It's really just making sure that you keep the information simple, and that the presentation is pleasing to the eye. That's really all it is. And limiting the number of bullet points that you have means that you are limiting the number of words that you'll have on the screen. And limiting the number of text slides that you have in a row will just change things up a little bit for your audience, where they'll be a little less likely to doze off or get distracted. So here's an example of what too many bullet points is. So you can see from this slide that there's just simply too much going on. There's too much bullet points, whatever the case is. And when I kept thinking about this, there's 2 types of people that are going to react differently to the slide. The first person is someone like me. If I see this slide that pops up, I'm tuned out. I'm already kind of, I don't know if it's 8, I don't know. I'm just looking around like this is just too much for me to take on. So that's kind of the first type of person. The second type of person is probably more like my wife, where they're actually going to read that. I mean, you throw up all those words, she's going to read it, and she's going to look at it. She's going to read the text. But the thing with that is people can read faster than the presenter can present. So they're going to go ahead and keep reading. And what they're going to miss is they're going to miss anything that you're contributing to this slide. So they're going to read through it, just focus like, hey, I need to read this because the presenter tells me I should. And they're going to read right through it, and they're not going to hear anything that you're contributing to the site. So again, let's go back to the overall theme when we're talking about limiting distractions. Consider too much text on a screen as just a big distraction. Follow the 6x6x6 rule, and that will help you limit distractions. So first one, 6x6 rule. The next bullet point pretty much goes hand in hand with that, and that's don't read your presentation. So people, while watching presentations, whether they're at a conference or a lecture, they don't go to those things to read stuff. They want to hear a human being interact with them. And it's okay to use your slides as like a cue for reading, but you don't want to be reading from your screen, especially with your back to the audience. It's both lazy and it's a little boring to watch. So if you need additional cues, then there's a notes feature within PowerPoint that you can use to display the things that you want to say, but then your audience doesn't see that. So just kind of keep that in mind when you do that. So we're going to take a look at the last slide that we had. And so again, I had told you that I'm the kind of person that's going to see this and just doze off. If someone was to throw this slide up on the screen and they start reading the slide word for word, I guarantee you the first thing I'm going to say is, are you really going to read this entire slide to me word for word? Because that's something that I can do. So think of PowerPoint as a tool or resource to help with your presentation. It's not the main focus of your presentation. And again, it's a tool or resource to help you with your presentation. So, but again, if you're needing to read something to your audience, like a quote or some data or something like that, you can keep some of that in the notes section of your PowerPoint so that only you can see it. And that's just simply less distracting. So that is the second point of our housekeeping item. So the third point I'm going to bring up is choose fonts and colors carefully. So there are some aspects of fonts and colors that we're going to touch on a little bit later on. But for now, it's important to know that bad fonts and bad colors can just cause a distraction in your presentation. So let's first talk about fonts. So two things we're going to touch on quickly is font style and font size. So first of all, font style. Choose something that's simple, Arial, Calibri, New Times Roman. These are just, there's a reason why document forms, use these as defaults. It's because they're just a little bit easier to read. I would also stay away from decorative fonts, thin fonts, fonts that might make it difficult to read, especially in small text. So that's kind of another kind of a no-no. Stay away from thin or decorative. And then this is another thing that people have talked to me about too is, there's going to be a lot of people on this that might represent your company, and you might have to do a presentation. And so naturally, you want to use branding that's probably within your company, maybe branding colors or fonts that are within your logo or something like that. I put a question mark behind that too, is because obviously it's something that you want to include. But again, if it's something that's going to be a distraction to your presentation, it's something that you're going to want to check out. So in this one, I put a question mark like, set up the presentation, do a little test in front of maybe someone in your organization just to see, get their opinion. Is this follow the theme? Is this too distracting or not? So let's take a look at a couple examples of font style. So in this situation, the font on the left side is bold, and sometimes it's like, oh, bold is always better. Well, yeah, it is bold, but if you look at the font on the right, it's just more readable. It's not blocky. And could you read that one? Yeah, sure. But again, in this one, you're just trying to be less distracting. So the font on the right is a little bit easier to read. Let's look at another one. So in this situation, I kind of switched up a little bit. But if you look at the font on the right, one, you'd probably say looks beautiful. Or maybe you'd say, yeah, that'd be great to have in a letter that you're going to send to somebody. But again, in a PowerPoint presentation, you want to make sure that the text is easy to read. And in this situation, I would just recommend using the font on the left-hand side just to limit any form of distraction. So that's quick on font style. Let's just quickly talk about font size. In font size, you really want to consider or think about who you're presenting to and where. How far is your audience going to be from the presentation? The answer to that question will typically determine what size font that you want to use. Typically, the rule of thumb is that you don't want to use you want to avoid anything smaller than 18 point. I think that's just default also within PowerPoint, but I even kind of recommend shooting up to the 20 size just to be on the safe side. So that's pretty quick and easy on font size. Oops, I blew it. I went a little forward. But what we're going to talk about now is bad color. And you probably already saw that. And what I was going to touch on is I'm sure there's a few Hawkeye people in here that probably get all pumped up like, hey, let's do a Hawkeye themed slide deck. So boom, push that up. And so you're thinking, yay. But to me, that yellow is just a little too much. And I don't care how much of a Hawkeye fan you are. That's just probably too bright. But of course, again, I can't throw, I can actually hear, I think, the Iowa State people yelling through this webinar, but they're saying, well, what about us? Well, I'm not ruling them out either. I throw them up, and I might have muted the yellow a little bit, but that red is just too much. So it's just a little bright. And so then I can't throw those two up. We've probably got some UNI fans out here too that I throw some purple on here, but again, that purple might be a little bright. So anyways, I realized I threw up like the nastiest colors that I could find when I was doing this up to represent each of the schools. But I was just trying to get my point across in that just make sure that the colors you choose are pleasing to the eye and pleasing when they look together. Similar to the point about, should you have your branded font and, your branded logos, just have someone take a look at it just to make sure that the colors don't make your eyes bleed. That's probably the easiest way to say it. So really quick, I just kind of went through. Let's take a quick look at, you change up the color schemes. Let's just kind of see how it looks. So for the first one, Hawkeyes, I took the black down a little bit and I changed the bright yellow to just kind of a lighted white color. So it stands out a little bit better. It's not so distracting. Same with the same with the Cyclones. I took that red out, kind of darkened it up a little bit. And I did the same thing with the yellow there too, just to kind of make it a little bit more pleasing. Some might say, that red might still be a little too bright. But again, that's you kind of get the picture. And last but not least, the you and I took that real bright purple out and just kind of made it a little bit more darker purple. So that pretty much covers the last point in our housekeeping section. And so for the third point, as far as staying away from bad fonts and staying away from bad color. So the next slide, to start my next point, I actually have a little clip, if Dustin can roll that for me.
So what I was thinking is that maybe we should have some sort of graphic, like if we have a bad quarter, put in a storm cloud. And when we have a good quarter, fireworks or a race car. Doesn't have to be a race car. Use your imagination.
There's this cube on the screen, and it bounces around all day, and sometimes it looks like it's heading right into the corner of the screen, and then at the last minute it hits a wall and bounces away. And we are all just dying to see it go right into the corner.
We have a lot of colored paper here. Why, oh why, do we keep printing this on white?
Ah, come on!
Yeah, I know, it's bland.
It's never gonna happen.
Dude, here's what I was thinking.
You gotta believe.
Maybe we could have some sort of riddle.
Wait for it.
Like something that you have to look for. Sort of a Where's Waldo? All right, let's quit while we're ahead.
That was so awesome.
That was awesome. Thank you. Some days I am just on fire. What can I say?
Every time I see that, I still laugh. But anyway, so the fourth point that I got to really bring home is that a presentation is not a presentation unless it has a clip from the office in it. No, actually, I'm just kidding. But you're probably actually wondering, what does that clip have to do with anything in PowerPoint? Well, the next point is actually to be careful with animations and transitions. So as you can see from the clip, the audience was way too engaged in the animation that was happening, even if it was just a DVD icon moving around. But, you know, they didn't hear one thing Michael had to say, even though he thought he knocked it out of the park. But be careful with the amount of animations and transitions that you have in your presentation, because they could actually be a little bit more distracting than useful. So again, just be careful with the animations and transitions. So we're going to get a little bit more into that a little bit later on in our 5 tips. So that would be it for our quick kind of do's and don'ts under my general kind of housekeeping items. So keeping these in mind when creating your next presentation, I believe it'll help you with limiting distractions. So with that, we will dive in. We'll go to the next screen. So I want to look for if there's any comments or questions at this point. Okay, sorry, just a second. Okay, all right. So with that, we are going to dive into the 5 tips of effective PowerPoint, or for effective PowerPoint presentations. So with that, number 1, what we're going to talk about is be consistent. So consistency throughout a PowerPoint presentation is very important. So it's important for a professional looking or distraction-free presentation. So let's talk a little bit about some of those items. So the first point under being consistent is it has to do with color schemes. So what I mean by color schemes is the group of colors that you choose to represent your slide deck. So when you're making a PowerPoint presentation, color plays an important role. It can influence the way that your audience views your presentation and how much information they're able to grasp. How different colors interact with one another and how you use them can have a huge impact on the appearance of your presentation. So let's talk a little bit about color schemes. So the first point under color schemes is simply to be consistent is it's just easier to look at, and easier to look at equals less distractions. So that's the first point. Second point, the next point in having consistency in your color scheme just makes the entire presentation gel. This is more of a subconscious effect on your audience. In other words, you're not going to say after a presentation that you watched, wow, each slide just really gelled. I mean, really, your audience isn't really going to notice until there's a problem or they're just overall distracted because of the color scheme is just off. So you're probably wondering where I should look at for color schemes. So here's a few links that you can go to, and these websites are places you can go to that help you with color schemes. So I'll kind of leave that up there. So be sure that your color scheme is consistent through the entire presentation. Okay. And next, after color schemes under being consistent, what we're going to talk about is graphics. So this doesn't mean that you have to have the same graphics over and over as far as being consistent. What I'm saying here is to not mix various graphics together all in one slide. So for instance, don't use an image with an icon with some form of clip art image all on one slide. It's just going to be a little bit distracting. So be consistent and have just one type of graphic per slide. If you want to mix it up a little bit, meaning that you want to use icons and images throughout, just have a different slide for each one of those graphics. So the last item under being consistent is when you use animations and transitions. So we discussed the importance of not overdoing it when it comes to animations and transitions, but here we're talking about using the same ones throughout the presentation. If you use the fly-in technique for your bullet points to come in, just use the fly-in technique for each one of them. If you're using the transitions kind of blending in kind of thing, just use that throughout the rest of the presentation. So that way it just does not distract from the rest of what's going on. So that is it for being consistent. So let's move on to our number 2. So for number 2, it is using high quality graphics. So you've heard it said that a picture tells 1,000 words, and that good images are far better than tons of text. You don't, and also as far as stock images, you're not using cheesy stock imagery. That could be a turnoff. Choose pictures that directly illustrate or support what you're saying to set a tone for the slide. Also, in the right setting, a bit of humor can cheer the audience up and keep them engaged too, because there's loads of great internet meme graphics that you can use and adapt. So that's number 2, is using high quality graphics. So let's talk a little bit about that. First one is icons. Icons have become more popular in presentations, and I simply believe that icons are more popular just because they're simple. It's just a simple, quick graphic that can get a point across without a bunch of text on the screen. But just like in everything, use it in moderation. So first one, icons. Second one is infographics. So here's a sample infographic. So especially in situations with numbers and data, they're important in presentations, but try to include an infographic here and there to break up large tables or other large amounts of data. It just makes it a little bit more appealing to look at. Infographics have many large benefits as they allow you to present your information in a user-friendly manner that's effective. And whatever your topic, it's possible to present in a form of any infographic. In fact, providing an infographic is a brilliant way of conveying in the easiest way possible. So there we go. As far as using high quality graphics, we got icons, infographics, and next is images. So for images, try to stay away from bad clip art. Many people in this webinar may have never even heard of clip art, maybe kind of dating myself, but I probably should talk a little bit about, what it looks like. So stay away from bad clip art. So maybe some of these images ring a bell. You can see that they're not quite pixelated, they're not high quality, and they're kind of cliche. So the reason why is because they've just been around for so long. And they've been around since the beginning, and PowerPoint's been using them from the beginning. So I would consider these as not a high quality image. So I have that crossed out there. Stay away from bad clip art. So Next, as I mentioned previously on the being consistent, each slide should have just one image per slide. This just helps limit information on a slide. It just like not having too much text on a slide, you don't want to have more than one picture on a slide. So it's that. Next is, as far as images, make sure the images that you use are relevant to your topic. Again, having images in your presentation that doesn't align with what you're talking about can cause distractions. And lastly, what I'm going to talk about is, here's a few websites that you can use to go look up quality images. Depending on the topic and the type of picture that you're using, you may have to pay a fee to use the way that you want to. So be sure to follow all copyright laws from those images or use laws for those images. But, you know, for instance, I use, with my business, I use Adobe, stock Adobe, that I have a subscription plan to that I can use in various ways. So that's one of the stock adobe.com is a website that I like to look at. So, but as I kind of alluded to it a little bit before, is just kind of a quick tip. Even with stock images, think outside of the box when it comes to the type of image that you want to use. And here's a kind of under my quick tip. So let's just pretend that you were presenting on teamwork. And instead of using like a cliche type stock image of a group of people in the office setting, you know, that's on the left that's using teamwork, which it is. You know, the tip I have is use a picture of something that's found in nature. Like, for instance, this next picture is a picture of bees. These are working together. So both pictures convey teamwork, but the picture of bees in nature is a little bit more appealing when it shows the thought that went into the idea behind teamwork. So just kind of a thought is the next time that you're thinking of using a picture, maybe think outside of the box a little bit. And just as another side note to that side note, both of these pictures were pulled from pexels.com, that website. So just kind of, it's a free stock image site. So with that, so we have icons, infographics, and images. So that's it for number 2, which is using quality graphics in your next presentation. So actually, I'm going to jump to number 3. And number 3 is, oops, I gotta hit the button, is knowing your audience. So understanding your audience will help set the entire stage for your presentation. So the same goofy effects and funny clip art that would entertain a classroom full of middle school kids, it might look unprofessional in front of your colleagues and clients. So, and also humor can lighten up the presentation, but if used inappropriately, your audience might think that you don't know what you're talking about. So the third step is know your audience and tailor your presentation to their tastes, likes, and expectations. So let me say that again. Tailor your presentation to their tastes, their likes, and their expectations. So you might say, okay, how do I go about doing that? So the first one is come up with questions for the who, what, how, why type questions. For instance, who are they? Who are the people that's going to be in your audience? What do you want them to learn? Might be pretty simple. Next one, how are they going to react? How are they going to react to your data? How are they going to react to the images that you have, the text that's presented, all of that. And lastly, but why are they even here? Do they have to be here? Did they pay to be here? Are they wanting to learn something? So those are different questions that will kind of help set the stage. So like, for instance, while I was preparing for this presentation, I realized that there's going to be a wide range of individuals from all sorts of backgrounds, all sorts of careers. So I focused a little bit more on a basic presentation and added some office humor in there because that's kind of something I liked. That maybe it'll help you kind of understand me a little bit better. But so that's with that. And then lastly is that understanding that font also plays a role in how the audience will receive. We've talked about font style being distracting, font size, but here we're going to talk about the font used. And just be aware of the font style for your audience. For instance, the font used in this last point is Comic Sans, which is probably inappropriate for a business setting, but it's quite playful when you're talking with kids. So that's pretty much it. This is a pretty short and sweet, but understanding your audience can really help with the decisions that will help mold an effective PowerPoint presentation. And what I like to think about this one is this is probably the questions that are asked and answered prior to building your presentation to kind of set the stage for it. When you know who's going to be there, naturally, that's going to help you kind of set the stage as you're building and creating. So that would be it for number 3. All right, so for number 4, what is number 4 is seek inspiration. So, well, we learned that color schemes are important to the overall layout and the overall look of your presentation to help with limiting distraction. So let's just throw a scenario out there. Let's just say that you're in the process of creating your presentation and you have an idea as to what you want the scheme to be, but you are just not feeling in the creative mood to create a presentation. And so what should you do? So the first thing that we're going to do, as far as that I recommend, is PowerPoint themes. So PowerPoint has built-in themes into the program. Not only are there various themes that you can play with, but you can also adjust the colors as well to fine-tune them to the way you'd like. So looking through the themes is a pretty easy process. And so to demonstrate that process, I included a short little demo video. Thank you. And so that was just a quick little video that just demonstrated how easy it is to look through various PowerPoint themes that are already built in. And that'll also help with the color schemes. And it also helps with the slide structure. So it's kind of a nice feature that's built in within the program. So PowerPoint themes. So the next point we're going to talk about. So let's go back to our story. So you decided to look, you weren't feeling the creative vibe. And then it's like, all right, I'm going to look through some of the PowerPoint themes. So you look through those themes and you just still didn't feel that inspiration for what you're wanting to look at. So, and you're still feeling a little bit stuck. So what's something else that you can do? The next thing you can do is pretty much just look around. I mean, you can just do a simple search on the internet for PowerPoint presentation ideas. And as I mentioned before, PowerPoint has been around since the early 80s. So there's plenty of ideas out there that you can look at. There are also places online that you can go to for to get some ideas. You can go, here's a couple of websites that you can look at that they have templates within the system that you can look through to get inspiration to maybe it'll jar an idea or something that you have. But even if maybe you don't want to be creative and you just want to purchase it, those options are there as well. You can go to those websites and actually purchase a template and then just simply add your content right to it. So as far as those websites, so this is just kind of seeking inspiration, is just kind of looking outside of within PowerPoint. You can first look at the themes and then you can dive around to some of the areas. So now if next time you're feeling stuck, just remember, seek inspiration, go out there and take a look at it. So that would be it for number 4. And we're going to go ahead and jump into our 5th and final tip. So the next and final tip is consider balance. So here what we're going to do is we're actually going to look at this point in 2 separate and different ways. So the first one we're going to look at is consider balance in your PowerPoint presentation within. So consider balance within the PowerPoint presentation. And 2, we're going to talk a little bit about considering balance outside of the presentation. So that might be, all right, this will be pretty interesting, but we're going to go ahead and dive right on in. So the first one we're going to talk about is within. So the reason why it is important and why it's recommended to have proper balance within the PowerPoint presentation, again, is to just create a more pleasing presentation for your audience. It keeps your audience on your toes, it keeps them engaged, and it keeps them, engaged in your presentation. So the things that you need to think about as far as proper balance within is between text and graphics, or is having a proper balance between text and graphics. Having a proper balance within your presentation, like images and icons, using various graphics, things like that. Proper balance between when you talk and when you show videos or animations, things like that. Also, in between information and questions is another thing. And it's also just as simple as considering balance between your title slide and your content slide. Just kind of breaks it up a little bit too. So that's just kind of something else to remember. It's just important to establish proper balance within your presentation. And typically, as far as knowing your audience is setting the stage when you create your presentation, this step is typically performed after your presentation's been created. So maybe it's while you're practicing and you're showing someone, you're going back and just making sure, hey, did I have proper balance within my presentation? So to round out, this is considering balance on within the presentation. So the next one we're going to look out, and to round that out, we're going to talk about considering balance outside of the presentation. So when I say outside of the presentation, what I mean by is between you as the presenter and your PowerPoint presentation. So up until this point, we've completely focused on the actual PowerPoint presentation, and we didn't talk much about you, the presenter. Since the actual PowerPoint presentation is an extension of you, the presenter, keep in mind the balance between and the focus on you and the focus on the PowerPoint. So with that, what are some of the things that we can work on to help establish balance between the presenter and the presentation? So number one is between the presenter and the presentation. So number one, connect with your audience. So it's hard to be relaxed and be yourself when you're nervous, but time and time again, the great presenters say that the most important thing is to connect with your audience. And the best way to do that is to let your passion through the subject shine through. So be honest with your audience about what's important to you and why it matters, and you can connect with your audience. Next one, make eye contact. If you smile and make eye contact, you're building rapport with your audience as far as connecting with them and your subject. So it also helps you feel less nervous because you are talking to individuals, not to a great mass of unknown people. So keep that in mind. Next one is as far as using your voice effectively and varying the speed at which you talk and emphasizing changes, pitch, and tone to help make your voice more interesting and hold the audience attention. And that means, as well as your tone of voice, your body language is crucial. To just get your message across. Make sure that you're giving the right messages. Body language to avoid includes crossed arms, hands behind your back or in your pockets, and pacing on your stage. So if you can bring yourself to relax, you will almost always present more better. If you actually start to enjoy yourself, your audience will respond to that, engage better as well. And your presentations will improve exponentially, and so will your confidence. So we're going to do a quick recap of the 5 tips. So number one, we talked about is being consistent throughout your presentation with the various tools that you're using. Number 2 is use high quality graphics like icons, infographics, and high quality images. Number 3, know who your audience is. Answer the who, why, what questions and how prior to creating your presentation to help kind of lay things out. And number 4, if you get stuck, seek inspiration by looking at other sample presentations on the web or through PowerPoint themes. Then after you've created and completed the draft of your presentation, look back through and check for balance between the elements within your presentation, and then remember the balance between you as the speaker and by connecting with your audience and remembering body language, eye contact, and simply smiling and having fun. So I trust that through practicing these points and applying them to your PowerPoint, you will be more effective in your next presentation. So thank you. With that, I have a few resources page. And lastly, thank you for your time. All right, so I'll go back and look at the question here. It says, how many slides are too few and how many are too many? Is there a such thing as too short and too long? That's a great question. In my research, I found varying answers. Some people say there's been some, I believe it's Apple, that have said no more than 10 slides. Obviously, in this situation, I used more. But I've also heard whatever it takes to keep your audience engaged and on the same page. So I don't have a specific answer for that. And I would probably say depends on maybe the industry. If it's a sales pitch or something that you're using, that might affect it differently. If it's covered with a lot of data that you need to get across and cover a lot of things, then that might impact as well how many slides that you have. So there wasn't a set and final rule that I came across that would kind of accompany all presentations. But that's why I kind of focus more a little bit on the content within the slide, like the 6x6 rule, just not overdoing it on each slide. I guess I would rather have 30 slides with information that's somewhat simple than having 10 slides that have 40 points on it. So I don't know if that answers the question, but that's what I'm thinking. What should a person do if they experience technical difficulties? That's a great question. And I don't believe I have the right answer for that, other than maybe reaching out to Microsoft as far as PowerPoint's concerned, or they could reach out to maybe someone in this field that could possibly help them. And maybe this question is kind of hitting it from if it's during the presentation, if they have problems. And that's a good question. I might have to punt that over to Dustin if he has any responses to that. Luckily, or hopefully, the organization has someone like a Dustin that can jump in and help out with those. But it's probably good to establish, just like we're doing in this presentation, to not do it by yourself. I know I've worked with other presentation tools where you might have someone that has access to the same presentation tool that they can jump in and help out if that's the case, or someone that's kind of behind the scenes. So that's probably focusing on not doing it yourself completely in case there is a problem. I've also heard where someone has maybe recorded the presentation and had access to that to be able to play it. So those are a couple options, but it's probably more so not taking it on yourself completely and having some other people that are maybe even on standby that maybe have that presentation loaded on a different computer that you can just quickly grab. So those are a couple other options, but great question. So I believe that looks like that's all the questions. Again, I just appreciate taking the time to join the chamber in this opportunity to learn a little bit more about PowerPoint. Thank you for listening to me and my goofy office things. But again, it's just kind of a nice opportunity to kind of look back on an application like PowerPoint. It's something that we all use to just kind of get a good refresher, and hopefully that'll help you with your next presentation. So thank you. I'm going to punt this over to Cindy, if she can help.
Okay, thank you all for attending today's presentation, and thank you to Joe Jolin of Jolin Media for presenting. Most of our Success in Business programs are available on YouTube, so you can revisit them or watch the ones you missed. And as we transition to a new CRM and website here at our organization, please make sure to watch last month's presentation by Dustin Roth on Growth Zone Info Hub to learn how you'll be able to enhance your company's chamber directory listing. So thanks again, and we'll see you next time.